Hello, everyone, and welcome to part 3 of our cyber webinar series, Cyber Claims from Preparation to Restoration. This is part 3 of the series, and we'll be discussing forensic analysis in cyber claims. So I am Tom O'Neill, Management Liability and Cyber Practice Leader here at Fred C. Church, and today my guest is Maury Haber. Maury is the Chief Security Officer at BeyondTrust. He has more than 25 years of IT industry experience, author of 3 books, and is currently overseeing BeyondTrust's security and governance for corporate and cloud-based solutions, and regularly consults for global periodicals, media, and much more. So, Maury, thanks for being here with us today.
Thank you so much for having me. Looking forward to our conversation.
Awesome. And I gave kind of a cliff notes on you, but can you tell us a little bit more about you and BeyondTrust?
Certainly. BeyondTrust is a leader in intelligent identity and security access management. We have privileged access management solutions that range from password solutions to the removal of admin rights on least privilege, all the way through remote access technologies. As for myself, as you've indicated, I've been in the industry many, many years, and I'm also an author of 3 cybersecurity books covering privileged access management, vulnerability and patch management, identity governance, and a new book, which will be coming out by the end of the quarter on cloud attack vectors. So again, happy to speak with you and share some of my knowledge.
Awesome. Yeah, once again, we really appreciate it. You are definitely the right guy for the conversation today. So a bit of housekeeping before we jump into kind of a Q&A with you, Maury. We have a lot of folks who registered from the BeyondTrust outreach, so thank you to you and your team for reaching out. For those who are kind of new to our webinar series, this is part 3 of a 4-part series. So we've done 2 sessions already. And I think when you registered, you had the option to get those recordings. So hopefully you got those. If you haven't, please reach out. We'll make sure we get those for you. And just a little bit about Fred C. Church. So Fred C. Church, we are one of the largest insurance agencies in the Northeast and a top 100 full service brokerages in the United States. So we do everything from property casualty, employee benefits, personal lines, risk management, and of course, cyber. So that's Fred C. Church, and just something to keep in mind as we talk through this. Fred C. Church, we are the insurance agent, we're not the carrier. So a little bit more housekeeping. We do have a chat, so feel free to put your questions in the chat, and we'll monitor that as we go and try and answer anything that comes in. We'll try and leave some time at the end as well. So jumping into it, Maury, and we'll primarily be discussing the role that forensic analysis plays as part of an insurance claim, but forensic analysis, may be something that our guests today, their organizations might need this prior to filing an insurance claim as well. So can you talk about why it's important to kind of clarify the role that forensic analysis can play both, in the event of what might be an incident and also when your organization has kind of officially sustained a breach?
Certainly. So this is really key when talking about forensic analysis. Hopefully you do have security teams that are basically looking after the organization and keeping an eye on potential threats. If they identify something, they are going to do an investigation internally, typically. That will include looking at logs, interviewing people, trying to verify if any data has been extracted, any vulnerabilities or exploits. This is assuming that the threat itself and the repercussions of that are silent. It's not as gross as something like ransomware where everybody knows it and your services are down, et cetera. So you have to first consider that when you have an incident in the investigation, it's where you take it, what you're going to do with it next. If you do consider that there could be exfiltrated data or something serious that you have to go for a cyber insurance claim, you're going to probably say this is no longer an incident and you're going to label it a breach. This is key. Once you use the B word, and it is the bad B word for this type of discussion, it has legal ramifications in many, many states and countries throughout the world. If you call it a breach, even if it's a single mailbox or a stolen laptop, that word means that you have to do some form of disclosure at some point. You have to get into a forensic analysis, particularly with an outside firm, et cetera, in order to potentially resolve the issue, do notification, contact law enforcement, et cetera. So let's just start with the concept of an incident, and we can take it further to the word breach as a part of this discussion.
Excellent. Yeah, really, I think really important to keep that in mind. I know for really, Maury, for our larger discussion in our cyber webinar series that we've been doing, it's really been about the life cycle of a claim. So, today we'll kind of primarily be focusing on how forensic analysis gets incorporated into the overall process when a client does go through that claim. Like I said, this is part of a longer series. Initially, we discussed the importance of an incident response plan. In our second series, we talked about all the various vendors that kind of get quarterbacked in as you go through a claim. So can you tell us about what it's like as part of an insurance claim to go through forensic analysis?
Sure. So we've already discussed a little bit about incident versus breach, but there becomes that decision point where you want to do the forensic analysis as a part of that cyber insurance claim. So your incident has gone down a specific path where you may have internally or someone has notified you of leaked data, or you've decided that there's an outage or had something as catastrophic as ransomware. When you're doing that, you have to start collecting evidence. And that evidence can range from log entries that indicate that there has been an anomaly, there has been a breach, there has been some activity that warrants the use of cyber insurance in terms of recovery of time, notification of personnel, cleanup of a mess, whatever you may have in your policy that you feel that you need to get your business continuity plan back on track. And your IR, or your incident response, is truly just a portion of your business continuity plan. Okay, so I'm going down this path. I'm going down this path of saying, I need to use or perform a forensic analysis. Rule number one, at least from my perspective, is when you get to that point, you need to start looking for an outside firm. While your team may be fully capable of doing the forensics, having that independent, objective approach to go through your systems and help you certify what you're looking at is accurate as an independent third-party auditor is key. Okay, this is why many times, probably discussed on the previous conversations, you do have incident response retainers with organizations, companies that will put boots on the ground and help you do this once you've classified something, potentially with the B word. Now we're going down the path of collecting evidence to support that cyber insurance claim. They're looking for everything from a firewall to authentication logs to CloudTrail logs, everything they can to build that story. But in order to build that story, you have to be able to first say, as a cybersecurity professional or even an IT professional, I am collecting that data and I am storing it appropriately, potentially in a SIM. If you're not logging firewall data, if you're not logging authentication, if you're not doing those steps, then it's very hard for someone performing that analysis to build that story. Then you don't even know necessarily what was jeopardized, what was stolen, what occurred, what malware may still be present, or anything along those lines. And that's hard. So let's take it from the first step. As a professional, way before any of this occurs, make sure that you're collecting all the data possible to be used as a part of that forensic analysis. If you can, and you are inclined to buy a SIM or use an MSSP to bring all that data together, even better. So when you get to that point of saying, hey, I've got something, I got all this data, I am going to classify it as a potential breach, notify cyber insurance and law enforcement, the forensics can occur to look through all of that data. And that's fundamentally key to this entire process, is the source, the escalation, the independent auditor, and then ultimately providing that evidence to your cyber insurance agent and carrier.
Yeah, absolutely. What are some of the areas where you've seen, maybe organizations get kind of tripped up, like where they didn't have maybe the best logs, or they weren't prepared? Like where are some of the fault points? How can people kind of make sure that they're prepared to be ready to provide the information, or that their network is prepared to, have forensic analysis be successful?
So there's a couple of failure points in all of this. The first is thinking like the threat actor, the hacker or the attacker, depending on how you're perceiving the infiltration. One of their first steps is to hide their trails if they're doing this silently. Again, blatant versus like ransomware versus that silent methodical attack to have a persistent presence. One of the things they'll do is delete logs. So you have to make sure that the logs are not deletable, are being transmitted in real time, and you're protecting that data stream. Because many times those logs themselves can contain PII or other sensitive data that, if stolen in themselves, could be a liability too. So you have to verify the integrity of the logs, the data, the transmission and storage, and then also the purging or the data retention aspect. Many states will have laws that you must keep things for a certain amount of time. I reside in the state of Florida. Our law is here that all public type of data, like if you work for a power company or state, must be kept for 7 years, which is an enormous amount of time. So you have to consider your data retention and the protection of that as well as a part of that forensics. Okay, so a threat actor wants to delete it. That's the first step for them to cover their tracks. But they can do other things to basically mess with your environment. They could be forging DNS records. They could be working with certificates to conduct man-in-the-middle attacks if they found a way inside your organization. They can mess with your NTP or your time servers so that the log times through various solutions are all out of whack or keep on resetting, so you can't get that clean alignment to produce that forensics analytics trail. So you have to make sure that your cybersecurity basics are in place in order for the integrity of the forensics to occur. Log integrity key, hardening of DNS so changes can't be made, making sure NTP is solid so it can't be tampered with. All of those are common mistakes that people make when they have to go through those forensics.
Nice. Yeah, I appreciate that. We had a question kind of come in through the chat about balancing, this is they're saying for smaller organizations. So, maybe that organization that might be in the 25 million, 50 million revenue, something like that, how do they balance like those capabilities with, the costs to mitigate and prepare? Like, are there kind of basic things that any organization can really do to be prepared for this kind of stuff?
I really do believe that there are some very basic things that even the smallest businesses can do. When I say small business, we're talking more than 20 to 50 employees. Anything smaller than that, the cost problem is real. Think about some of the MDR vendors that are out there. We're not going to do names. Think about some of the MSSP vendors. Again, not going through their names. They can provide very efficient cost-based services to give you a SIM in a box, to provide that forensic capability, to provide that analytic capability of that data going out. So while you may not have a dedicated security staff or you outsource your IT, this additional help can ensure that your cyber insurance as a small business can be effective and the data, the hardening, and all the aspects we talked about are working correctly. Now, you don't have to necessarily go to a third party for these things. This is really, really important. Many times you may consider your ISP, your internet service provider. Many of them have business divisions that have these services in themselves to help you. So while they're protecting the organization from potential malicious threats transparently in their data centers before you egress to the internet as a part of your ISP services, they can add value-add services from a business perspective, whether that's antivirus solutions, whether that's EDR solutions, whether that's log solutions, to ensure the integrity of the data and the assets they're protecting fall into that place as well. And they do this at scale. They are used to doing this for hundreds of small businesses and medium businesses at large. Don't discount their capabilities in order to apply these best practices.
Excellent. We actually had a follow-up to that question, maybe not your area of expertise with regards kind of specifically to Microsoft Azure and any setups and configurations that are a must regardless of the cost. I'll before I pass it over to you, I certainly have one from, the insurance perspective as we help all of our clients to renew their policies. The number one kind of control that the carriers care about the most is multi-factor authentication. Everybody who's ever met me has probably heard me talk about this, but multi-factor authentication is absolutely key, not only from a security aspect. I think actually Microsoft came out recently with a report that, like 98% of the breaches that have happened could have been prevented with multi-factor authentication. So securing, anything Azure with MFA is absolutely key. So I would say that's my recommendation in terms of setups and configurations with Azure. Any thoughts from you on that, Maury?
I think that's absolutely sound advice. And I would probably take it one step further. Anything that you do should have some form of multi-factor authentication or, hey, remember me for the next 30 days type approach when I'm using this system from this IP address, et cetera. When you think about Microsoft, you have Microsoft Authenticator, you have Google Authenticator. Use it wherever, ever possible, whether it is just your personal banking systems or your business banking systems. It will mitigate that many threats. If you're relying on just a username and password and that's it, you at some point will be ripe for that attack. Now, security best practices imply that every password on every system should be different. Personal password managers are great for the smallest of business, but as you start to cross that threshold into medium or enterprise, then you get into the next best practice that cyber insurance wants, and that's privileged access management. That is the management of privileged accounts and the removal of admin rights. When you couple that with the MFA that you've been mentioning, you have a very sound strategy of unique passwords. And even if those are stolen, no one can authenticate, no matter how sensitive the system is, because you've backed it up by some form of MFA. And those are the two key pieces, at least in my opinion, when applying for cyber insurance or answering the questionnaires that will help you lower your costs or make sure that, your policy is not denied.
Yeah, I think that's great advice. Pivoting now from MFA towards another of the key security controls that a lot of carriers ask about the most is backups. Okay, so like getting back to the conversation about forensic analysis, like how critical are the backups, as part of that forensic analysis and investigation? And like, have you seen situations where like the backups can be breached as well? Like, is there, as part of the analysis, are we looking at the backups and making sure that those are safe and organizations are able to kind of restore from their backups?
Backups are a very interesting problem in this entire space, small business to enterprise as well. It's not that you're just performing the backups, it's how and where it's stored and what has access to it ultimately. If you're still doing it on premise, that's one thing, but you do have to worry about those threats, including ransomware, that if the connection between the server you're backing up and the backup server can be compromised or has common credentials used in lateral movement, your backups could be just as compromised as the primary system during a ransomware attack. And that's quite real. That's a real potential threat. So what you have to think about is, where are you storing it? How are you storing it? If you're doing it to the cloud, make sure that it's only accessible for restoration with key accounts, MFA, and not basically just an open S3 bucket where you're dumping data to. That's just a really bad idea. In addition to that, if you're doing it in the cloud, ask if they have fault tolerance and procedures in case there is a problem. If you have an issue, can you get to your backups, and how long would it actually take to restore those backups as a part of RTO, RPO, and even MTTR, mean time to repair, bringing that system back. Obviously, that's all going to be based on your internet connection. If you have a slow piece of pipe and your backups are put up there and you have an issue, it's going to take you a long time. Now, with that in mind, this is where cyber insurance becomes important, because they will, as a part of normal policies, cover any outage or time or anything else. So you have to consider, is my backup safe? Are they local or in the cloud? Can they be compromised? And how effective would it be for me to actually do a large scale restore, considering the volume of data and everything that I need?
Absolutely. And I think more and more organizations are looking to their backups to restore instead of paying that ransom. So it's critical to make sure that you understand, one, what your abilities are to back up, and two, how long it will take to do that backup. Because when you get into the insurance claim situation, not only are you managing whether or not you're going to pay that ransom, the cost of the forensic analysis, a number of other vendors, which we talked about in our last session, but there's also the business income portion of this. Most cyber policies include a business interruption and extra expense provision within the policy. So if you're the type of organization that loses money anytime that you're unable to access your systems, every day, every hour equates to a dollar figure. So having those backups and being able to trust your backups is critically important.
It is. And a lot of times you might not just start with restoring your system. You may need to do that forensics piece first in a good amount of detail to ensure that your backups don't have the same problem. Or you may have to go to an older date to determine when the actual infiltration or compromise occurred so that you don't reintroduce the problem. So you might have that lag time in between to state, okay, I might lose a week's worth of data or a month's worth of data, which would be horrendous, but it's still going to take me 2-3 weeks or even a day, depending on bandwidth, to do that cloud-based restore. That's the only bad caveat about a cloud-based solution is how long would it actually take compared to me having high-speed backup systems potentially still on premise with the network available to do so.
Right, makes sense. So I know I want to touch on a few more things about Beyond Trust and privileged access management solutions, but before we kind of pivot to that, for the CISOs and the IT directors listening in today, business leaders, I mean, what are some of the things you recommend, whether it's from a procedural standpoint or a software standpoint? What are the key takeaways that they can bring back to their organizations as they think about how to prepare for a breach, how to prepare to be ready for forensic analysis? Anything that we haven't touched on yet?
Yeah, so many of you have probably heard it. It's not if I will be breached, it's when. As a cybersecurity professional running a business, incidents happen all the time. That's a given. It's when that incident gets to that threshold that you have to be prepared. If you are doing the right things, like collecting the logs and ensuring their integrity, make sure you at least have someone looking at them on a regular basis. Because if you're not, then you can't look for normal behaviors and patterns, even if you're using the best SIM that's out there. If you don't have the resources to do that, get that external help, that MDR vendor, then MSP or the ISP business center to help you do that too. The biggest mistake that I see going on in the recommendation is no one is looking. You've set everything up to do the look, but you might have been able to find the problem much sooner if someone was just keeping an eye on it. So that's my biggest recommendation, is to invest in something that's basically minding the store or keeping an eye on your logs, your security events, to ensure that there isn't that subtle backdoor potentially waiting to be exploited.
I think that's great advice. It kind of reminds me of one of the things that I like to preach the most, which is, cyber security, network security is no longer something that just your IT team does. Like, it truly should be something that you take at an enterprise risk management approach. It's something that your entire organization needs to be bought into. You build a culture around it, and those are the organizations that are like truly protected the most. So pivoting now, and I'm going to share.
We have a couple of really great questions in there, so I'm happy to toggle into that if you'd like.
Awesome. Yeah, I want to get to the questions, but
okay.
I also want to just quickly touch on privileged access management and the Beyond Trust Discovery app. So, of course, in addition to you being a forensic analysis guru and able to walk us through all this today, Beyond Trust, the Beyond Trust services for privileged access management, there are a number of them. So can you tell us a little bit more about Beyond Trust and specifically this application, which I'm going to share in the chat so everybody has the ability to access it?
Certainly. So Beyond Trust is a leader in privileged access management solutions, covering password management, check-in, check-out rotation with full session recording, endpoint privilege management, which is the removal of admin rights on Unix, Linux, Windows, Mac, anything. Users do not need local admin rights at all, which is a key attack vector used by threat actors. And one of the biggest things to help ensure your cyber insurance is at the lowest cost, in addition to MFA. And then remote access technologies, the ability to securely connect help desk or vendors or contractors, those third parties into your organization at a low risk without the need for VPN. Now, once a threat actor does potentially penetrate an environment, one of the things they do is they try to enumerate assets to determine where they can move laterally, or they have compromised an individual account associated with an identity and can leverage it against additional assets. So in my case, it might be my name present on multiple systems or have access authority to multiple systems. To eliminate or basically mitigate those threats before a potential incident, Beyond Trust offers a free privileged access discovery application, as you can see here on the slide. This tool will help discover all of your assets and environment and the local and domain accounts that are present, so you can determine how a threat actor potentially can move throughout your environment. Do you have the same service accounts? Do you have the same admin account and password? Things like that, so that you can basically say, look, every system should have a unique password. Or why does John Doe have a local account here? Or why does John Doe have administrative access for all of these systems? So that you can prevent many of the attacks, the lateral movement, or the things used by ransomware or the exfiltration of data that would cause you to basically have a cyber insurance claim. So if you've not seen this tool, I encourage you to check it out. You'll find the results to be quite interesting because it is designed to help you understand where that identity account relationship exists and the liability that it would pose to your organization. Back to you.
Yeah, you can't fix what you're not aware of. So
exactly.
This is a great place to start. So we do have a little bit of time for questions. Maybe I'll just kind of tee some of these up to you, Maury, if that works for you.
Certainly.
So question here from Jay Fernandez. Can you touch on on your point of view about the importance of a network topology and architecture documentation that is stored securely and accessible? And he notes that he recommends not living on network file shared data in the event of a breach.
Really critical. So first off, your network should be segmented. Having flat networks is just a bad idea. Users should not be able to cross zones without an explicit need. And if it's a very sensitive zone containing PII, it should be gated access. Now, part of any good plan is that documentation, knowing where systems are, et cetera. And it shouldn't be just placed on a file share like any other document. The reason being is it is PII for the business itself. It lays out the network blueprint that a threat actor wants so that they can figure out the host names, IP addresses, gateways, firewalls, everything that you may have put in place internally to get to the information they want. Now, with the digital transformation approach and a cloud approach where cloud is first for applications, your network topology might be pretty slim. You'll have a user LAN, a guest network, maybe a couple of domain controllers, but everything egresses to the cloud. You might document that, look, here's my gateway, here's my proxy, here's whatever it may be, or an SD-WAN approach to controlling traffic to the cloud as well. Even though that may seem simple and agnostic, it still provides critical information to a threat actor as to how they can navigate the environment. So I would treat network architectures, IP addresses, host names, all of that just as sensitive as any PII, and secure them in a place that, when needed, they're there, but they're not generally available to anyone just on a file share type access.
Great advice. So we have reached 1:30, but there is another great question. So I want to wrap up with this final question here from John. So
Sure.
in a breach/incident, remediation and evidence collection are often in competition. So do you have any advice or guidance on managing that?
They are in competition. Getting the business back in a stable state is key. There are ways of considering how to do this. If you do have a formal DR plan, relying on your disaster recovery machines or virtual machines until the primary systems are cleaned up, that's just the best approach that I would normally recommend. If your business does not have a DR plan where you could spin up VMs or fault tolerate over to other systems, you're going to have that measure or that priority as a part of your business continuity plan and IR plan, which is going to take precedent. Restoring those systems, reloading them, bringing them from backup, or getting the proper information for cyber insurance. Now, you might find the answer to be a little bit telling there. You may forego operations and a little bit of brand reputation in order to leverage your cyber insurance. But if it's something like, okay, we're out right now and I can't file claims during a natural disaster, you may weigh the business portion before that. And a lot of that becomes an executive decision, but your IR plan should state your priorities. And I can't tell you which one is more important based on your vertical and the delivery of your services or products to clients. That becomes an individual decision.
Yeah, absolutely. The key takeaway being, though, get everybody in the room who's appropriate to be making that decision on the front end, put it on your incident response plan, test your incident response plan, and you will be prepared. Hopefully it doesn't happen.
And if you're large enough, consider a DR type scenario for your most critical systems. Look, if it's a virtual machine, that's not that hard to do, as long as that DR system was not compromised as a part of whatever incident or breach that you're dealing with.
Yeah, absolutely. Awesome. Well, I think that's a great place to kind of wrap up. So once again, I really want to thank you, Maury, for joining us today. I think that was some really great insight and a peek behind the curtain into how this whole forensic analysis really goes down. And hopefully everyone has some takeaways to think about that they can use to be prepared in the event that it does happen to them.
Yep, plan, and pray you never have to use it. That's the best way to think about it.
Absolutely. So thanks to everyone for joining today. And please look out for our invitation to part 4, which will be our 4th and final part to the webinar series about cyber risk management. And we look forward to seeing you again. Thanks.
Thank you all.